Seterusnya, kita beralih pula ke sesi pembentangan yang kedua. Masih orang yang sama, tetapi mereka bertukar. Moderatornya Miss Lily, pembentangnya Encik Abed. Dengan tajuk kajian tindakan beliau iaitu Writing Conference Approach in Muet Report Writing. Majlis mempersilakan.
Selamat pagi kepada semua penolong kanan, semua yang hadir untuk kolokium hari ini. Pembentang kita seterusnya adalah Cikgu Abed Achelis Nunung Anjuli. Dia adalah guru akademik tingkatan 6 dan telah mengajar selama 29 tahun. Saya akan baca sedikit abstrak kepada action research yang akan disampaikan selepas ini. This research is to help pre-university students to enhance their report writing skills, especially analyzing and synthesizing data from non-linear text. 15 students in the specified class were directly involved in this research. This action research was carried out following the difficulties and poor performance of the students to analyze and synthesize non-linear text in their report writing. This school-based action research employed qualitative and quantitative approach. Qualitative findings from this school-based action research revealed that oral feedback via writing conference not only engaging active participation of the learners, but this approach had significant impact on learners' ability to analyze and synthesize information in the non-linear text in their report writing. Data from the pre-test and post-test revealed significant differences in the students' overall scores in their report writing. The qualitative findings and the scores converged, suggested that oral feedback via writing conference could enhance the learners' report writing skills in accomplishing their writing tasks. The study has implication towards the learning process of report writing. Replicating this action research to a bigger sample size would further expand the current understanding of the effect of oral effective feedback as a crucial part of the teaching and learning report writing. Kita mempersilakan pembentang seterusnya Cikgu Abed Achelis Nunung Anak Julie untuk menyampaikan kajian tindakan beliau.
Alright, thank you very much Miss Lily for introducing me for this presentation. So everybody, can you see my slide? Can you see the slide now? Yes, alright. So as what had been mentioned by Miss Lily, I am going to talk about writing conference approach in Muet report writing, right? So I am doing something like more or less like what Miss Lily had been doing, but it's only that we are using a different approach. She is using the scaffolding approach and I'm using the writing conference approach, right? So the issue comes simply because in the teaching of Muet, we have something which is very critical for our learners, whereby to answer question 1, the first question, it requires a critical thinking for the learners. Because for question 1, it requires them to identify key features, analyzing, synthesizing the data, which is in the given time frame in a non-linear text. So you can see that what we are doing, we are trying to help them very much, okay, to acquire the skills. Okay, that is to identify, to analyze, and to synthesize the data. But what actually happens, okay, out of the previous teaching experience, we can see that our students will continuously making the error, all right? So as if that they are not being taught about it. And then it becomes very difficult also because after they do, we pick up their writing product, and then it is quite challenging for us to negotiate meaning with the students, especially when it comes to the marking of the papers. Okay, the papers are taken, the writing product are taken from the students, and then we mark and then we comment. So you can see that the main issue is to negotiate meaning in making writing comments, right? So other than that, a very important issue that we have given written feedback, but it seems that it does not actually improve the learners. So based on that particular notion, I conducted a very informal interview with the learners in a very informal setting, talking to them in the classroom. So I come to notify or come to realize that the written comments that we have given written feedback does not actually giving them the learning process. Okay, they could not actually acquire that particular knowledge. So it is what I say as it sheds some gray area in the teaching and the learning process, because we are marking the paper meticulously, but then we do not realize that the student does not benefit from that. So our assumption is the students are doing it well after we do the marking. The marking is done, so we assume that they are going to look through with the marking and all the comments given. However, it does not, right? So the focus of my research is to improve their writing skills, okay, through oral corrective feedback. So these oral corrective feedbacks, that is the one that I convert and become the writing conference in the classroom setting. And then improve writing skills, which is specifically for these two, that is the analyzing and the synthesizing of data, which seems to be the main core in the question 1, a non-linear text, whereby they are going to interpret information based on the bar graph, based on the line graph, or based on the pie chart, and then relate the information to the second non-linear text. So the objective of the research, we want to see what is the impact, see, to explore. I'm not going to test, but it is to explore the impact of oral corrective feedbacks via what we call as writing conference approach. And then to see the outcome of oral corrective feedbacks in the writing product. So the issue is on the writing product. We want to see that the writing product is improving in their ability to analyze and synthesizing. So this is the framework of this research. So it is a school-based action research. So data is being through interview, a very informal interview. And then the student scripts were analyzed also. And it is not only analyzed by me as the researcher. I get external marker, who is the examiners for MOET, who have been willingly to help me to do the marking. And at the same time, I'm using memos, that is classroom observation. So these memos was conducted in a very naturalistic setting, okay, because we do not want the students in such a way that when they know that we are observing them, they try to become unnatural. So I'm using a naturalistic approach, okay, so that they will behave in a very natural way, so they do not know that I'm actually observing them, right? So again, when we are coming about statistics, we are talking about the pre and post testing. So the data analysis, the interview is conducted, is being analyzed using thematic analysis. So whatever is being mentioned in the interview, I'm putting it into thematic to enable me to study the raw data from the interview. And even the script, okay, the script, I put it into theme so that I will be able to analyze what are the strong part or the failure that the students are facing after the intervention. So again, classroom observation is under thematic analysis, and then the pre and post, it is under content analysis. So the general data analysis, so this qualitative data is using interpretive. Again, the writing is also under interpretive, except for the pre and post test, because we have the statistics. Initially, I'm only using the descriptive statistic, whereby I'm looking into the mean of the score of the pre and the score. It was towards the very end of the research that I proceed to inferential statistics for some reason, which I will be explaining to you later. So this action research is using this particular model as proposed by Camis and Meckert in 1988. Seems to be a very old one, but then this one had been used for a long time. Now, the issue that I'm highlighting here is the planning, all right? So it goes under 2 cycle. So in the planning, by this time, I was trying to identify what actually is the root of the problem. Okay, and then I take action. This is the intervention, which I will explain later in 3 phases. And then in the observation process itself, and then I reflect, and then it goes to be a revised plan. So I have the second cycle, which is totally different from the first cycle of the intervention. Research questions. How do students, Form 6 students, benefit? Okay, how would they benefit from the intervention? And then after the intervention, how do students describe? So is it something useful or not useful? Or is it useful as compared to the written feedback? So the issue now, we have the oral feedback through the writing conference, and then we have the written feedback whereby the teacher picking up their work, sitting down in the staff room, starts marking, starts smiling, and of course sometimes it develops anger when we don't see that our students are doing well. And then if you can see the third one, right, the third one, this was the last part whereby after I've done this and I felt that I have to do something about the raw data of the pre and the post. Initially, it was only the descriptive statistics. Then I proceed to the inferential because I would like to see what would be the significance of the intervention. So these are the action taken. So the first one, so after the students did their writing, and how I go about with this one is, it is quite impossible when they are doing the writing in the hard copy. So what I did was I'm using the Telegram. So the students are typing their writing work. Initially, they could have drafted it in the paper, and then after that, they send it to me personally through Telegram. So why do I make it so? Because it will be very easy for me to pick it up. That is number one. And I don't have to process the writing and then immediately display. So this one, if you can see here, it is a whole class, the first whole class conference. The students' writing tasks were randomly picked, and then we discuss about the mistake. So this one, the teacher is playing the role. The researcher is taking a role here, right? So after I explain the mistakes, and then you know how the students, they are just being passive, right? Or maybe 1 or 2 of them, they are asking questions about it. And then after that, the researcher going to the one-to-one approach. So maybe they don't understand here, so I have to go to one-to-one approach. And then after go one-to-one approach, and this one is something which is very time-consuming, and then I proceed to the writing conference number 2, whereby by this particular time, I'm trying to reinforce. Right, so you can see learners are to write their report writing based on the class conference. So this was the class conference, and they were approached individually as their homework. So when I come back the next day, I get back to the Telegram, right, and it is done live in such a way that because using the projector, so everything can be extracted immediately. So this is the review, okay, and then when I come to that one, I come to the second cycle. Simply because the first cycle, it has some complication, which I will be telling you in a short while. So you see that in the second cycle, I go about with the writing conference 1, writing conference 2, and it was towards the very end that I'm using the one-to-one approach. So here, instead of me, who will start talking as in the first cycle, what I do here is I pick up the students' writing, which had been displayed taken from Telegram, and then displayed to the whole class. So if taking, for example, that students find that their work is being displayed, so I ask them to work in pair. So they are going to discuss. They are going to be freely discussing with their friends to identify errors. So after that, I get them to talk about it and share it with the class. What would be the error that they had committed? Okay? And then they share it with the whole class. So this is the time that I'm telling them you have to be very, very open-minded to learn. So it's quite difficult in the beginning because they feel shy to talk about it, and then they feel bad when somebody else is talking about their work and might kind of feeling that they have. But then after a period of time, they are getting used to it. So my role is only to give them a constructive feedback, right? If it's wrong, then it's wrong. And then I just give them something constructive so that that error identified is justified by me as a professional person in the classroom setting. And then the conference does not end like that, the whole class conference. It proceeds to the WC2 World Writing Conference 2. So in this phase, I purposely pick another set. So this one comes in 3 sets, right, normally. So this one, they are going to comment their friend's work immediately without discussing. So my assumption is after the discussion, it could have developed some kind of skills and awareness what would be the problem in the next writing. So individual students starts not to comment on their own work, but to comment on friends' work. So how do I go about with this? It sounds very impossible, and it was very impossible in the beginning. So I am using what we call as paralinguistic signal, meaning that if it is something wrong, I'll give a kind of reaction so that the students will be able to know there is something wrong in that particular analysis or synthesis, right? So thereon, if they have been talking about it, the researcher negotiates meaning. So that is the time that I intervene, and that is the time that as a researcher, I will explain to them in detail, right? So out of the two, WC1 and WC2, they abound that students still having problems of understanding it. So this is the times that individual approach is needed again. But the beginning, it requires, if you see the first cycle, it was a not active participation, but in the second cycle, I tried to involve the students actively. So if you can see, this is my reflection from the first cycle. When the researcher is presenting, the learner seems to be passive, and this is what actually happens. So our our assumption, when they are passive, they know, right? So they maybe know and maybe not knowing it. So somehow does not develop their critical thinking, and that is why I go to the second cycle, whereby I let the students to identify and discuss freely, right? So that writing product, I still repeat the errors, and then one-to-one in the middle of the intervention, it can be time consuming, right? And then from the qualitative data, it explains that they still have, okay? But then you see, understand explicitly the error. So this is what is very important. And then there goes with a good understanding of the error. And then second cycle. So you can see that something is changing in the second cycle when I allow the students to discuss freely. So they are playing active role in the class discussion. I really becomes the facilitator here. So actually their benefits, okay? So it creates greater self-awareness. And then when they work with their friends, it develops critical thinking also and active participations. And then we can see that it is the best platform for the students, two students, and the researcher and the students to negotiate meaning. They might have the reason why they got the analysis wrong, why they got the synthesis wrong, right? So with that one, coming to the second cycle, it was observed that the learners are getting more confidence, and what was also observed that the approach had developed their critical thinking in analyzing and synthesizing data from the non-linear text. Right? So this is the pre and the post analysis. So you can see that the post is the one in the red dots. Now, if we can see here, so this one is a specifically designed marking rubric, okay, to enable me to conduct this particular action research. So if you are asking me why is it that we have 100 mark, okay, the MUE teacher might be asking why is it reaching the 100 marks. So it is a specifically designed, whereby how I design it is clearly explained in the book, okay, in the article that I've written, which I will not be talking much about it here. So you can see in the pre-analysis, 60% 9 students below average. So that means they are just only describing and making assumption, 9 students. And then the 40%, 60, 40%, 6 students only managed to score above it. And yet they are not analyzing it excellently. It is analyzed with little success. It's only a little success. It is not an excellent thing, right? So in the post-test, you can see that. So in the pre-test, none can go for, how do you call that, an excellent level. But here in the post-test, you can see that there are 4 students here, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Post-test, 26%, right? Can score 6 students above scores, and then the post-test, there are 5 students who could be good in analyzing. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they are considered as good, which does not exist in the pre-test score. And then this one for the synthesis, you can see that the synthesis is even worse. Okay, a lot of them, they are below average here. So there are 10 students, okay, below average. And then only 5, little success. And then in the post-test, you can see that the score below average is 47%, right? So the post-test is getting less. Instead of 67, it becomes 47%. Okay? Instead of 34%, it becomes 20%. And this one is something that immediately crop up from the post-test that 5 students, that which is equivalent to 34%, are able to analyze the data successfully. Okay, it's not with little success, right? And with that, so actually, my initial attention was to stop by looking into this particular development. But then they still bring me into another level of analysis, because I can see, if you see this participant number 2, not going to the what we call as above average. So you can see 50 is the above average. A lot of them doesn't show any kind of good improvement. So that is why I'm going to another level, which you might be interested to ask why, because seems that this action research become an experimental research instead, right? So the idea is to see in a very more accurate, a more detailed analysis of statistics. So as I fulfill the requirement of PET-T test, of the pre and post test, I'm looking into the mean of the pre and the post test. So you see that significant difference was observed in the pre and the post test. So you can see with the T, right, 4.972, and at the significant of 0.05 significant level. So I reject, the null hypothesis is being rejected, and that one post-test cause analysis is significantly higher than the pre-test, right? So you can see that in the mean for the pre-test and the post-test scores, in analyzing data, it is approximately 13%. Again, for the synthesis, this is for the analysis, this one is for the synthesis. So it was observed that there is significant difference. So you can see the TV, 3.792 at a significant level of 0.05. So null hypothesis is rejected. So that means that the pretest, okay, rejected, it means that the pretest and the post-test are different after using the writing conference approach. So with that, we can see that the mean is improving. There is a difference of the pre and the post-test about 10%. So this one confirms that that the pre-test of using the writing conference approach is much better. Right, so this goes my reflection for the overall of the action research. So interview revealed that the learners benefited from it. And then as they are talking about the error, their own personal error and their friend's error, it enabled them to become, the class becomes learner-oriented. And then you can see that they do not need to interpret writing comments as compared, but they just get immediate feedback whereby we can negotiate. They must have their reason why they fail to analyze, right? So we can give immediate feedback through the conference, right? So you can see that it gives them the opportunity to negotiate. So if we are talking about written comments that we give, so the students might be happy if they see the word good. If we are putting the word bad or poor, they might not be happy with it. But then now we are coming into a different level with this kind of approach. If it's wrong, they must give some justification why they do so. Because in interpreting data, the non-linear text, it is very critical to understand why why the data is interpreted as such, right? So you can say that if it's in the written, they just merely follow what is suggested by the teacher. They cannot negotiate with the teacher. And then the whole class approach. So you can see that approach feedbacks conference prove efficient. So this is what we get from the feedback from the learners. And then the engage active participations of the learners is what I've said to you. And then the students have learners autonomy. Okay, we give them the autonomy to look into the error that they commit, right? And then it is self-discovery. Okay, this is actually one of the approach in the discovery learning. So by using writing conference approach, I am also giving a discovery learning. They starts to discover the learning process, right? So you can see it is really a contrast to the written feedback. So normally what we did was after we have done with our lesson, we immediately write our class reflection. But now at this particular point, I believe it would not be appropriate after we negotiate the meaning with the learners, after we negotiate what actually and why they are doing as such. So for future research, you may go in depth with that one. Okay, and then we may go into a bigger samples, right? Using a more complex non-linear text maybe, and then of course it can be other form of genre. It is not only on report writing. We can see that there are so many genres in the teaching of writing. So maybe this report writing can be applied to another genre in the ESL teaching. So the conclusion, the conference had helped the students to analyze, and then we had helped them involve learners in negotiating with their friends and the researcher, and then teacher-learner negotiate how it should be written. Okay, this one is critical, how the analyze should be written, how the synthesize should be written. And then we can see the writing conference via corrective feedback significantly enhance learning process. So they are the one who identify their errors, not the teacher. Okay, so after that they negotiate it. So you can see that writing conference should be one of the core elements before we write our teaching reflection. Right, so this is the reference. You can read the whole thing in our book, right? So with that, thank you very much. Okay, so any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Abbott. Now we give this opportunity to the Kolokium participants to ask questions to our presenter on his topic of writing conference approach in MOET report writing. You can also post your questions in the chat.
To see the chat, I have to stop presenting, I think. Yes, so just please shout it out so that I don't have to stop presenting. Just in case if I have to refer to the slide for further clarification. Some question, please, anything, so that we can learn from the question.
Cikgu Albert, Cikgu Raymond here. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Raymond. Nice to hear your voice.
I have a very simple question for you.
Right.
If I'm not mistaken, conference learning by conference means students have the opportunity to use speaking skills and writing skills together, right?
Yes, they do.
Okay, that answers my question. That's all for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raymond. Actually, what you are talking about is what actually I have in my mind when I do this. Actually, it is a two-in-one situation whereby we are actually improving their confidence to talk, right? So they are talking when they are commenting on their friends. Actually, in actual fact, I should have recorded all the session, video recording all the session that I'm conducting this intervention. But because I'm not using my video or anything, a transcript from the video, okay, because it's just merely an action research. So I did not record. Actually, if I have recorded, and then it could be very interesting for you to see when they first started, how to talk and how to comment on their friends' work. Thank you very much, Rami. Any more question, please?
I just want to ask you, yeah, writing conference. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
writing conference here means you are taking a day with the students just to correct their mistake. Is that what you mean? Well, I think one way to learn, students, from 6 students especially, they should negotiate with teachers if they encounter problems or if they are not happy with the teachers marking. And then I think this is one way. This is what do you call that? It is one-to-one learning, as what you mentioned just now. It is good for the student.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think students should be encouraged to ask the teachers to, so that teachers can point out their mistake and why the mistake is done, what happened to their writing, what are the mistakes in the writing? Is it because of the organization of ideas and so on and so forth? So I think, mistakes should be done by teachers there and then. I know writing conference is good, but for the students to learn, I think they need to learn there and then. They need to know their mistake there and then. And teachers need to tell them their mistake there and then, instead of taking one day just to have a writing conference to correct their mistake.
Okay.
Yeah, and another thing, you were using quantitative because you were talking about all the percentage, the statistics, is it not? But don't you think that using quantitative usually is when we have a big number of respondents?
All right. So
Yeah.
basically, you have three issues to address. All right. So I addressed the last issue that you mentioned about the research method, about the quantity and the qualitative research methods. So basically, I'm using, if you look into my my framework, my research framework, the research framework is analyzing the interview qualitatively, whereby I'm putting it into thematic analyzing, and then the observation is qualitatively analyzing also. It was only the score, which is also using descriptive statistics, okay, whereby there is no way that we can see the improvement if we are not using descriptive statistics. The PET test that I'm using, the inferential statistic, is just merely to confirm, all right, whether there is good improvement, whether there is significant level or not significant, all right. I'm fully aware that people will be asking about the PET test because I have small sample. But before I do that, I have been checking on the prerequisite of a PET test. One is not less than 10. So I have 15, which is good enough. You can check in the how t-test should be conducted, right? So I'm fully aware of that one. Now, if you're talking about my qualitative, I did not present it here in this paper simply because it will be too long for me to do the presentation in a very thematic way that you might be interested to see. So I believe that you can see me after the colloquium. We can always negotiate on it. Yeah, your second question is, it takes me one day to do conference. It doesn't have to take me one day to do the conference. It is only a 1 hour conference, but it repeatedly done. Actually, this conference is done with 16 intervention multiplied by 60 minutes, So you can calculate that. I have it in my real how to call that, in my real write-up. I have 16 intervention multiplied by 60 minutes. So it is 960 minutes. All right, so which is equivalent to 16 hours of intervention. So during this intervention, I split it up accordingly. So instead of controlling the whole class, the 60-minute class, a 1-hour class taken by the teacher, I'm giving a portion or a bigger portion for the students. So that is how it works. I don't take a so-called to be a one-day conference. If it is a one-day conference, I'm pretty sure for one reason, your student will sleep, right? So after 1 hour, it's still very active for them to participate. I think it would be good to have 1 hour instead of a one day whereby the students are still alive or to become a dead meat by the end of the day. So the reality is, after we have been doing the marking, you know our students, we don't look down on them, but a reality is a reality that you cannot deny. And that one is the gray area that I talk about in my earlier reflection of the teaching. Do you realize that I mentioned about the gray area? The gray area is, after we are done with the marking, we assume that the students are not responding. So we are very happy, and with that particular assumption, we are happy we are done with the work, the marking is done, the teaching is done. So we are happy. That is the gray area whereby when I interviewed the student personally, what happened? So your thinking and the reality, the empirical evidence from the students does not work. It is a totally different thing. The reality is the empirical evidence from the informal interview that I conducted with the students. That is why, if you see in my earlier steps that I took in the planning of the action, I conduct informal interview. Why? Simply because I do not want the students to hide their reality. Right? So it's what you said, they should, being in Form 6, the should does not work. So by addressing the gray area, I was able to dig into the root of the problem. So do I answer your question? Why that the gray area is there and why this research is conducted, right?
Yes, Mr. Albert.
Any more questions? Now I'm looking into the chat.
There is one question in the chat. Okay. The question asks, from your research finding, it seems students that master in English language influence their report using report writing skills, HOT, higher order thinking. What do you think? Was the question asked in the chat.
Oh, I see. This one is asking about the using of high order thinking skills. Okay, when I first conduct this particular research, I was thinking very hard. Does my research involve high order thinking skills? Specifically, I can find that actually I am triggering their high order thinking skills by allowing them to identify the errors. So if they, as a person, the one who commit the error, they might not be able to identify the error. But I certainly believe, as what is being experienced here, their friends would be able to identify the error. And what is also very interesting is, when the students are doing the writing, they might feel that one is right. And for that reason, he or she is writing that analysis. So if you look into the second cycle, they were allowed to defend. So it is actually using the HOTS, high order thinking skills, on both of the pair who is discussing. In the WC1, in second cycle, I left them to discuss freely. So somehow the students are actually triggering one another. See, you see, if taking, for example, this one is wrong, but then to him is right. So he will try, he or she will try to defend why he or she is trying to write that analysis in that way. So after there is something like WC1, when I intervene, only then both of the students realize that something is wrong or what they have been doing is right. So I think if you are talking about HOTS in this one, actually part and parcel, we have the HOTS in it indirectly even though I'm not using catch or T as mentioned in the action research. All right? So do I have any more questions?
We have come to the end of the presentation. It has shown that this approach of using the writing conference approach had significant impact on learners' ability to analyze and synthesize information in the non-linear text and in their report writing. We hope that future students taking the MOET examination would benefit from using this writing conference approach to improve their report writing skills and to increase their exam scores. Okay, with that, thank you.
Majlis merakamkan ucapan terima kasih atas pembentangan daripada Encik Albert dan moderator kita Miss Lily. Okey, demikian tadi kita sudah dengar dua pembentangan kajian tindakan dalam Kolokium SMKBK ke-6 tahun 2020 ini. Esok kita akan berjumpa lagi dalam sidang yang kedua. Sehingga esok, jaga diri anda, jaga kesihatan, amalkan 3W dan elakkan 3C.